Hey everyone, and welcome to the 30 Days of Courage. I'm your host, Ashley Easter, founder and executive director of Courage 365, and I am so glad that you are tuning in for tonight's show. We are going to be talking with actress Dulany. She is an amazing silence breaker, and I just cannot wait to bring her onto the show. Well, without further ado, I want to invite Dulany on to the show. Hey, Caitlin, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It
It's
is
really,
truly
really
an
cool.
honor to speak with you.
Oh,
I have been following you in the media. I know we were introduced probably, I want to say like a year and a half ago, voice to voice on the phone. And I was like, wow, this woman has such a powerful story. Her, I don't know, just your energy is just such a you have this activist spirit, but you're also so approachable and a person that I really think a lot of survivors can connect with. And so
thank
I am
you.
excited to have you here tonight. And we have arranged this instead of doing a talk, everybody. Tonight we're going to be doing a interview format. And so I'd like to just pitch you with one of our first questions. All right.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for having me, Ashley. I love the work that you and your organization do, and I'm really thrilled to be here. So yes, let's
Oh,
go.
well, feeling is mutual. All right. So we're already getting some beautiful comments coming in. Great to be here. Hello, everyone. Okay, great. So glad that people are tuning in. And really, before I ask you this first question, I was getting messages or comments from people saying they were all the way in Paris and that they were working with time zone differences. And so, literally,
Wow.
people from around the world are tuning in now and will watch the replay later. So I'm just super excited to share your powerful story. And what many
Thank you.
people may know is that you are a Harvey Weinstein survivor. And the Harvey Weinstein survivor story, we've heard about this collectively in the news. And you are one of what New York Times calls a silence breaker. And I would like to know if you could share a bit about your personal story and what ultimately led you to being called a silence breaker by New York Times. I mean, your story is incredible, and I'd love to hear it in your own words.
Thank you so much, Ashley. So it was a long road, um, meaning I met Harvey Weinstein in 1996 and in New York, and was assaulted by Harvey Weinstein at the Film Festival that same year. I was sort of groomed and ended up in a really tough situation, which was very devastating and very scary. And I honestly thought I was the only one. I thought that it was my fault, and it's that's a survivor's story often. How you translate things, and it changed my life. I moved out of New York, and I tried to put it all behind me, but in truth, you kind of live daily with that kind of stuff, and it caused a lot of anxiety, and I just kept that secret. It wasn't my secret, but I kept it, and it affected my life and a lot. And I was I was driving. I live in Los Angeles. In 2017, so 20 years later, and I got a text from my sister, and this story popped up. Harvey Weinstein paid off sexual harassment accusers for decades, and I, I mean, I can cry thinking about it now because I was like, And the next thing my sister said was, "You should tell your story." And and actually, I had a difficult time with that. I mean, people were coming out daily, and it was so hard for me to think about getting those words out after so many years. But it was lovely that my sister said that to me, and I did speak out a few weeks after that, and what's happened now since then has transformed my life in a really wonderful way in the end. And in this particular story, there were so many Harvey Weinstein survivors, and we were connected through an email group by a few of the women who started it, and 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 I found community with a lot of them, and we met and we talked and we worked amongst ourselves and we began to form friendships and alliances. I mean, it sounds more ideal than it is. A lot of it's hard. We're telling tough stories. We can't believe this happened. People have different personalities and things, but the good news was that I just found this kind of desire to keep going and to change what was this very difficult thing in terms of even speaking it out loud into something productive. And so what led me to be a silence breaker was around just being in community with these women and other women that I met that were survivors of other perpetrators, and you know just working with them on things. And so what happened was around the time of the Harvey Weinstein New York trial in February 2020. um, some of us joined together with the support of the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund to kind of form the Silence Breakers in an effort to keep the story about and the focus on the survivors, kind of like you do. And because too often it becomes about the perpetrator and their journey, and so I had a real strong desire to keep the story focused on us, especially the women who are going to be testifying at the trial, and hopefully through that affect change and move the needle around this kind of a trial in general. So I sort of found this purpose, and I'm very grateful for the support around that time, and I just was very motivated um, to get my voice out there to support the other women and around the trial.
Wow, wow. Well, first of all,
Yeah,
like I'm just so sorry that that happened to you and to so many other women. It's really
thank you.
such a travesty. And I know
Yeah,
that as somebody who was watching the Me Too movement develop and seeing those stories come forward, it shook me to my core. And it was something that was like, okay, wow, we're finally coming to a place where people are banding together and talking about this openly. And I just want to I just want to say thank you for your courage and the courage of the other women that spoke out, because truly, I think you gave voice to a lot of people who didn't have voice, and
yeah,
really were um, very supportive in creating this movement where it is more acceptable to talk about our stories. So thank you for sharing
yeah.
that. Yeah,
Of
yeah.
course, and I'm grateful to everyone who shared their story. They
Mm,
That felt like support to me. All over the world, everyone's story felt that buoyed me as well. So much, like everyone else feels that
yeah,
empathy for each other and that support
yeah.
is, yeah,
Mm,
wonderful.
wow, wow. And one thing really stuck out to me that you said, like at the very beginning of the question, there was that you thought you were the only one, you felt
Yeah,
alone. And I think that is something that almost every single survivor can, really, that we felt that at some point or another. And I think sometimes people look up to, Hollywood celebrities and actresses such as yourself, and they're like, oh, they've got it all together and they had this, movement and all these things. But every survivor goes through those kinds of feelings. And I think you just
yeah,
brought a level of rawness here to this conversation that I think so many people really can resonate with. So thank you for sharing
yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely. For
sure,
sure.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
the next thing I wanted to ask you is, many survivors in our community have spoken out about abuse, and I began sharing different parts of my story in 2014 before there was a lot of support. Um, and I was wondering what it was like for you to begin finding your own courage and resilience as you navigated speaking out, getting involved in the Me Too movement. I think while we can't underestimate the pain that survivors are feeling, even after the Me Too movement, there is so much more conversation now. But you were kind of on the front end of having that conversation. So how did you find that courage and resilience? And everybody else, as you're listening to this conversation, feel free to drop questions in the comments because we will be doing a live Q&A after this with your questions. But that's one that I would really be interested in hearing about from you.
Yes. Yes, and thank you, and thank you for Courage 365. It takes a lot of courage, and brava to you for speaking out as you did, and finding your voice. Really, it does take finding the courage and resilience. It's I'm sure you know what I mean. You don't think you will have it.
Yeah,
Um, but you, it's almost, to me, at first I just had to take the steps.
yeah,
Um, uh, you know, and find my voice, and then the courage, so it's like taking the first step. I mean, I was really scared and nervous to speak out, and before the news broke, like I said, I didn't know there were others, and I didn't think I would be believed, and you know even when I did speak out, I still had those feelings, and Harvey Weinstein was a very powerful man still, and I definitely felt that I was the future of my career, my safety, potential backlash, in terms of scrutiny, were all things that I may have to deal with, um, and uh, and in and I think all survivors have those kinds of feelings, and you know again, I had a hard time speaking about the events. It felt really awful. Just to get the words out. It is re-traumatizing, and it can lead to a lot of feelings. At least it did for me. It's extreme sensitivity, but I just knew that I had to do it, and for me, and everybody has a personal journey. I really found a lot of courage and resilience through my focus on my determination to support the other women who were speaking out against Harvey Weinstein and in the Me Too movement. The Me Too movement really helped me, buoyed me to, even though I wasn't sure what the end result would be. Um, I didn't want to be careful anymore. I wanted to be a part of the movement, and I wanted to help. And I think that, you know, by feeling that by telling my story, and I think this is, feeling that by telling my story, I could make a difference for others. And not just because I was speaking out about Harvey Weinstein, but just because it was such a powerful thing to do. And anyone that empathized with it, maybe I could help them. And just so that idea of making a difference and gave me courage and resilience to keep going. And I just I just I just started to feel that it was important, for me and for others to achieve justice, some kind of justice in terms of my particular perpetrator. And I just sort of put one foot in front of the other, even if it was difficult to do. Um, I tried to take the right steps. And this is a very personal journey, but for me, the right steps were to speak to district attorneys, and to, to vetted press if they were interested, and filmmakers, and um, whoever could help get my story or our stories out there. Um, but I, but it wasn't. Um, it was just a very difficult thing to do. I'm a very private person, and so I want anyone to know that talking to anyone about your story is very difficult, but the larger goals helped me, and the the promise of healing also. I held, just, I don't know, it was very very personal. I held some hope that this was a chance by, you know um, telling my story, and I think I learned this by speaking to other survivors. It would get better. I would feel better. It would maybe even be easier at some point. Um, and it was a healing process. So I kind of held that hope um, in me, and that probably led to some courage and resilience as well.
Mm, yes, I love how the fire in you was not just to speak up for yourself, but to speak up for other people and to support
Yeah,
other women. That's
yeah,
powerful.
yeah. And I don't know if that's everybody's story, but it's similar to when you hear about another survivor and you get upset for them.
Hmm.
Um, Whatever that is, it's a little bit of a nurturing thing or a fiery thing. I mean, everybody has their own journey, but that was very motivating for me. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think
Mm.
that's maybe why we see so many survivors who then go on to become advocates in some shape or form,
Yeah.
because we just don't want to see this happen to other people. And that's really,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
very motivating. We don't. And if we can help or make a difference, we want to do that. It is
Yeah,
motivating.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, I've read some of the media scrutiny about you and the other silence breakers, and some of it was professional media, some of it was social media. But there's a lot of people that have opinions, and they're not all positive. So some people are like, "These women are attention seeking," or "Why didn't you come forward sooner if it was such a big deal?" And you should have done things differently. And I think so many survivors have gotten that type of scrutiny, but you're receiving this on a very public and a
Yeah.
national, maybe even international stage. And I'm just wondering, like, how did you get through that? What helped you get through that public scrutiny of telling such a vulnerable
Yeah.
story?
Thank you so much. I mean, again, I feel like anyone can relate because you're so worried about what people are going to think. You're always worried as a survivor. I found that people are going to believe you. It
Mm,
hurts that they don't. It's so scary to think that they won't. And it's one of the things that makes it so scary to speak out is feeling like you're being judged because you're already dealing with shame and you know did I cause this and all these things that are so any measure of doubt or criticism does hurt any of us. And again, what helped me was the support of other women that I was in touch with, and Harvey Weinstein survivors, Bill Cosby survivors, just not always a survivor of someone in the news. But I grew up with someone who was um, who Michelle Hurd, who's going to be on your show. We grew
yeah.
up together, and she's a Cosby survivor, and an old friend of mine was also assaulted by Harvey Weinstein, Catherine Kendall, and I didn't know till then. So I think um, that I had a network of women that helped me. So I was lucky that way. Um, and But now there's so many organizations and ways, and there's a lot more resources now. So I'm happy for people who want to reach out and find support. So so the support of people that had gone through similar things as me that I knew and was becoming acquainted with more of them. And also, I mean, honestly, friends and family that are supportive, and I know not everyone is, and not everyone knows how to talk to you about it. Just very selectively, if I felt that there was someone that I thought might understand it, that I was close to, um, like my sister or something like that, and it was good. And if it seemed like it was too hard to talk to, I was would just leave it. That's fine too. Trying to be gentle on all of us, and um, and then activism, just getting involved. It kept me feeling, well, I know that my feelings around this are very altruistic and grounded, and so I don't, it doesn't matter so much what other people are thinking, and also learning about how the trauma of sexual assault and harassment affects people, giving myself enough of an education to realize that I was not alone in keeping silent for so many years and translating what happened to me in ways that made me feel shame and anxiety and um, and it's not always the thing you want to do is sit around and read about that kind of stuff every day. Even though oddly you're going through that kind of stuff, but it was helpful for me to educate myself a little bit around trauma. um because, oh yeah, so that's why I feel this way, or that's why i kept I kept silent, and and found it so difficult to see that.
Yeah, yeah. What I'm pulling from what you're saying is just, being so grounded in this is my truth, having a support system, getting educated
Yes.
on why my body's responding this way, and then even the activism is like taking back the narrative for yourself that those things really can combat that scrutiny from outside. Is am I
Yes.
understanding that right?
Yes, you perfectly. Thank you. You
Yeah, yeah.
summarized that very well. Yes. Yes. Yes, it's very transformative. Thank you
Mm.
for asking that question.
Absolutely. Wow. Wow. And I think those are things that everybody listening can do. Even if you can find one safe person, because maybe you don't have a big community, hopefully
Yeah.
in the Courage 365 Facebook group, you can find some connection with others here if you don't have that support system. But doing that, finding a way to take the narrative back for yourself. And yeah,
Hmm.
those are things that I think everybody can work to apply. So that's very practical and helpful, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and so what advice would you give to survivors who are coming out with their story? And maybe more specifically, is there anything that you wish you had known? And again,
Yeah.
everybody who's tuning in, go ahead and drop your questions because we're going to do a live Q&A with your questions in a few minutes. But yeah, anything you wish you knew that you could pass along?
Well, I wish I knew. I mean, again, it's just what you said. Find someone or people to talk to you think will be supportive. Give yourself some options. It can be very, very private and personal. And or it can take a more official road. It's just up to you. Take all the time you need. But I wish that I had given myself the opportunity to kind of gather some resources that would be at my disposal, like Courage
Mm.
365 or other groups. One in six is a good one for men. Um, Voices in Action, Echo Training, Rain. Just because probably before speaking out, I thought I'm going to just oddly this I'm going to figure this out all by myself,
Right,
and
right.
that's just my personality. And then in those harder moments, it would have been nice to say, oh yeah, I remember I read that website, and so I wish I had sort of gathered some of the resources before I took my journey, just to have them at my fingertips. And I wish that I knew that it would be re-traumatizing, and that I would eventually heal and it would get easier. And I guess reading people's journeys and stories could help. I wish I understood this a little bit more, and um, and yeah, yeah. So maybe just did a little bit more research before I. But I don't think when I spoke out there was as much available. But so
Right.
yeah,
That makes
yeah,
sense. Yeah.
yeah,
It's really important to know what you're getting into, because when you do share your story, while you have this empowered moment of like, I'm taking back the narrative, there often is that backlash, and
yeah,
just being prepared and understanding that that's coming, but it will
yeah.
get better. And
Yes,
I love that.
yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that's great. Yeah, and also you're talking about how some people decide to keep it more private, and so maybe
yeah,
you share it with one safe person instead of,
yeah.
making
Hmm.
a big statement someplace. You gotta decide
Yeah,
what's right for you. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. It's
absolutely.
all very personal. Some people, have a therapist and they talk to their
Hmm.
therapist first, a friend. Yeah, it's a personal journey, and that's important to understand also. Um,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. And, in talking about that, particularly during the backlash, and even, now things aren't, I mean, things are still there. Like, I think we heal from abuse, but oftentimes it's, it's always something that's still part of our memory. And so I'm
Yeah,
wondering, that has to take a toll on your body, mind, and spirit.
yeah,
And can you give
yeah.
us some tips on how survivors can keep their sanity and start practicing wellness to take care of themselves during this time?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and I'm sure you know people who are watching will understand that it's harder to take care of yourself when you're going through a trauma, and there's a lot of adrenaline going through your system and a lot of ups and downs of moods, and it's just knowing that taking care of yourself during that time is paramount. So, and you don't have to be perfect at it. I would say I told myself I didn't have to be perfect at it, but I didn't want to let myself go completely off the rails. So, I sleep is really, really important. Exercise and maybe just walking or breathing, taking quiet time, and just kind of being as disciplined as I can around those things, and just um, trying not to be too hard on myself. I don't have to be productive, all the time, every day. I can rest and relax, especially if I'm going through a hard time. And
Mm,
I was lucky to have like Louise Godbold, who is, she runs Echo Training, which is a nonprofit around trauma, and she's an expert in trauma. So I had someone that I could talk to about that, and still found myself resisting the good habits. So not being too hard on myself about them, but knowing that they're there, and that yet not getting enough sleep could really aggravate bad feelings and stuff like that. So, and just try my I think um one thing I have been successful at is giving myself a little break, is a self-soothing or hugging. Like, I don't have to be perfect, don't have to have the most productive day. um Almost like how you take care of yourself when you're feeling sick. Maybe just get in bed and read a book or something like that. And again, the resources, the knowing that they're there, like Rain and, 1 and 6. Echo
right.
training, works in action. Yeah.
And I love that
So,
mantra that I don't have to be
yeah.
perfect. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a good one. And I think a lot of times when survivors have experienced assault or really any type of abuse, um, there
Yeah.
there can also be that emotional abuse of like, you are only worthy when you are performing in a way that makes somebody happy, and that can be an underlying current. And so reminding yourself,
Yeah.
like, I can just rest and I'm still worthy, and I don't
Yeah.
have to be perfect, I can just be
Yeah.
myself. Mm.
Yes. Yes. And I don't have to be hard on myself, you know,
Mm.
and be kind to myself. I don't have to be perfect. And in my imperfection, I can, be loving to myself. It's okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I've got one last question for you before
Yes.
we go
Yes.
to a quick break, and then we'll open it up for the Q&As. I can see some questions just dropping in, so I can't wait to dive into those. But um, many times survivors, I think they feel like their abuse story can almost take over their life and overshadow
Yeah.
everything else in their
Yeah.
life. And I wondered if you could talk about like redefining your life and some of the accomplishments that you have as a woman in your career and your activism. I think you've had an election win for a board, and maybe just some advice on defining your life in your own terms.
Yes, thank you. That's a great question, and I have to say that, you know it's I went from this not being able to speak about something to leading board meetings and sharing things, and that's just my own personal journey. There's so many ways for someone to sort of feel empowered, but um, what happened for me was I definitely got involved in trying to make a difference, and the area of safety from sexual assault and harassment and survivor support and policy issues in the entertainment business and beyond. Um, I mean, it's been very transformative. So I have gotten involved in those things, and in it and yeah, I'm really grateful how about how I've grown. And the first thing was really just, as I said, as a silence broker, focusing on the women and their stories around the Harvey Weinstein trial, and just I mean, I really did you know did a lot of work around that I'm very proud of, like speaking to press and organizing my thoughts and contacting press and making sure our voices were heard. I mean, and then since the very beginning, the safety on set and for performers was very important to me in an area that I thought I could make a difference. So I did end up getting involved in the Screen Actors Guild union. I ran for convention delegate 2 years ago and formed the sexual harassment a committee on sexual harassment in the Los Angeles local.
Wow.
And yeah, and we passed at our convention in 2019, we passed some resolutions about forming committees and about safety meetings on set and things we're still working on within the union. And then in this last election, which just happened, I ran for a local board seat, and my platform is around sexual harassment, safety from sexual harassment, speaking about that, making a difference, in the entertainment business. And I won a seat, and I won a seat in the convention. So we're in the process of that now. Our convention is actually this weekend, and I'm going to, stand up and put forth resolutions for change around set safety and things. So I'm still working on the same issues, but finding I have I've been determined enough to kind of put myself out there and try to make a difference and lead in these areas. And that all comes for me, from just starting the journey of speaking out. That's my personal through line, and my that I mean, the advocacy work it's a lot of work and it's determination, but it's a big source of joy for me and gives me a lot of you know that sense of empowerment, and, as you said, um, taking back your own narrative, because you're for survivors, your story is yours and you get to tell it, and then you get to reshape that narrative how you want it to be. And that's your right. And you can um, hopefully find times where you trust that this difficult road that you're taking will lead you to a place of hope and optimism and promise for the future. And every journey is different. I have someone I'm very, very close to who is just taking a much quieter, um, more personal road with their journey. And this is, someone that I love very much and I'm close to, and we talk all the time, and we're just very different people.
Mm.
But his journey is a lovely one too, just privately seeking justice and talking to people that he's only very close to. So anyway, I'm grateful for my journey, and can only emphasize to everyone that I'm so happy for them to take whatever their journey might be, and it's up to them. They get to tell their story and reshape their narrative, and take their own personal journey. So
That's
yeah.
beautiful. Wow. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. This has been such a
Yeah.
great interview, very insightful, and
Good.
I think people can relate on so many levels to what you've said. And I love how you're
Good.
talking about everybody's journey is different, and that's a
Yes.
beautiful thing that we can
Yeah.
support.
And I also want to just encourage people to understand that the journey is one of healing, even though there are times where it doesn't feel like that. And but there you know there is an end road. I mean, I'm not there yet, but there are times where you start to feel your personal growth and your
Mm.
sense of power. Your relationships get closer. discover new possibilities. There's a lot to hope for, along that difficult journey. So that's the other thing I wanted to say.
Yes, thank you for leaving us on a message of hope. Well,
Mhm.
everybody, we are going to take a quick break for an ad from one of our sponsors. We have several sponsors for the 30 Days of Courage. One of them is Sojourners, which you can see their byline on the screen, on below the screen. But SNAP, Survivors Network of those abused by priests, they have a beautiful commercial that they have provided us, and we're going to view that, and then we'll be right back with a live Q&A answering your questions from the comments. Hey everyone, we are back with the 30 Days of Courage. I'm here interviewing Caitlin Dulany, and she is a silence breaker by the New York Times. She's a Harvey Weinstein survivor and activist and has done so many amazing things. We've just gotten through with a beautiful interview with her, and now it is time to answer your questions. I've seen some of these dropped into the comments. You can go ahead and drop some more if you would like, but we're going to go ahead and start with this question here. And it says, we are united in our survivorship, however, separate in circumstance. How would you suggest communities go about bringing the bright light of press to hidden survivor communities?
That's a very good question. And my experience with press is, it is this sort of individual learning curve. I didn't know who to call, where to go to at first when this story broke. And enough people spoke out before me that by the, even though it was a couple weeks, it wasn't like I was going to make headline news talking to anyone. And so I'm pretty scrappy about the press thing. I've learned, meaning I've learned a lot, and it, all of it's all of the papers, or news outlets have um, emails for journalists, and if you find out which ones are following particular stories, or deal with sexual harassment or sexual assault, they've covered that kind of story before. So I did a lot of research around that, and I use Twitter. You know, if you follow the journalists um, that are covering the kinds of stories that you might want to tell or need to tell or have covered them in the past, sometimes they will also follow you back, and it's just good to follow them and know what's going on. And so I did a lot of that, of reaching out, and I didn't always, they answer you or they don't, but just educating myself and doing some research, and then and staying in touch with certain ones if I did have um, a chance to talk to them. And these are big news outlets and small outlets. I did an op-ed for the Independent, which is a paper. Sometimes it's also certain news organizations. Really do cover this stuff and these kinds of issues well, and that's important too with press, is to respect the um, and to have a good sense of who you're getting in touch with. Try to make sure people aren't taking advantage of you and stuff like that, by just vetting them a little bit, looking at their writing and things like that. But yes, personally, trying getting in touch with people was really what I did. And there's also there's organizations that can help, and the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund is one that helps with publicity and legal help. So they're good to get in touch with, and probably webs different um, nonprofits can help you too. I know, for example, just in the Model Alliance, which is in New York, has um, you can report different situations to them, and they support people who are speaking out in that particular um, industry. And there's probably other nonprofits that do that, I'm sure, in other specific industries. So doing a
Definitely.
little research. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's so good. And I would echo the Twitter suggestion.
Yeah.
That's where I've made most of my press connections, either through mutual colleagues or through Twitter. And one thing I would just add as a tip for people who are maybe going to be reaching out to press is make sure that your Twitter header and bylines and all of those things reflect the story you want to communicate. So you don't have to put your whole story there, but use relevant hashtags. Make sure you use a picture of yourself or, something like that to really allow them to see that, hey, you're serious about this, and they can know what you're about when they see your profile.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Yep. Yep. Awesome. Okay, so we've got another question here. Rowan Farrow's book, Catch and Kill, helped me see so many similarities in how Weinstein responded to allegations of abuse and how religious leaders respond to allegations of abuse. This battle for transparency and accountability sometimes feels so hopeless. What are some good first steps we can do to change the climate?
Oh, that's a lovely, lovely question. Well, I mean, first steps are um, it's a lot of what we've been talking about. Be authentic, be true to yourself, tell your story in a manner where that in a way that you can feel safe and you can have some support, and and you know get involved with a larger journey, if that suits you. And definitely one of the things that many of us who've taken this on and become ad, advocates and activists is, we do work around policy and legislation. I mean, I'm not a politician, but I've worked with Equal Rights Advocate, which is a nonprofit in California that works around uh, rights for women and girls, and or Child Help USA, or this group. There's certain groups that lobby for political change, and that really moves the needle. It's the way we did press, like I said, around the Harvey Weinstein trial, for example, and any way that so working to affect change within your community, because a lot of laws are local. I've worked in California, New York, but these laws need to change all over the country, and you can find groups working on that, and then legislators who are willing to put forth bills, and that's how that works. So you find it's a whole system to navigate, but it's quite kind of local. In every area. There's New York, there's California, there's legislature, there's people who there's every year people put forth bills, and there's nonprofits that lobby for certain rights and changes, and getting involved in that is good. And you know, let's not forget about the Me Too movement. It's it's still something we're all a part of. Everybody's story is powerful. We believe you, and we share. There's collective experiences that are moving us to try to make things better, and we're still all working on that. So
Yeah, that's beautiful.
yeah.
So we're kind of trying to change hearts and minds with our stories, but then also change the climate control and changing the
Mm-hmm.
laws. That's how you change the climate, is often
Yeah.
by creating laws that support survivors. So yeah, those are really beautiful, actionable steps.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And for example, in 2018, um, I and a number of other women worked with the Equal Rights Advocates, which is a political nonprofit out of San Francisco, and they had the connections to kind of recruit and and work with specific state senators to to change some of the laws around sexual harassment in the workplace. So the time to report, we were able to, and then the governor had to sign it. It was a process, and changed from 1 to 3 years, for example, the
Hmm.
time to report. And there was a lot of work around um, non-disparagement agreements and NDAs and things like that. And some of that stuff passed, and then I mean, I'm not one of the, I'm not, but working again with Equal Rights Advocate,
Hmm.
went back the next year and supported some more bills and got more bills passed the next year. So it kind of takes time, and you can get involved in your community with that kind of stuff.
That's great. That's
Important.
great. And
Yeah, yeah,
I do know, since this question was kind of posed as somebody who was mentioning similarities between Harvey Weinstein and like allegations against religious leaders, I know
yeah.
SNAP, Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, they often do a lot of work to try to, you know, partner with people who are changing laws and legislation. And so, whoever submitted that question, that would be a great organization to maybe
Yeah.
connect up with for those purposes. Yeah.
Yes, and I'm sorry I didn't mention Snap before. Snap is great. It's a great resource
Yeah, it really is a good one.
for any survivor. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, next question is, in your personal experience, might you share what you've learned in terms of things you look for in a person to discern whether they are a healthy person for you to disclose or confide in? I guess with abuse story, how do you know when it's a safe
Oh,
person?
that's a really good question. So I mean, first of all, uh, you know, if you um, looking for people who, like I said, someone that I know who is another Harvey Weinstein survivor, Louise Godbold, who runs a training, a trauma training nonprofit. So looking for people who actually have some professional experience in this area, that's always nice, looking at the resources and seeing, and or finding groups inside survivor groups, things like that that are vetted and safe. And there's probably a lot of people who will can understand and be open with you in terms of um, I'm trying to think it in terms of my own. So I guess that within that group is also other survivors. So survivor groups and is and kind of professionals is great. And it's harder in your own personal life. I mean, I would say that you know the people that I love and trust the most, or the people that the people I'm closest to, maybe for me, my siblings, or um, uh, I or good friends. I still wondered how it wasn't. Those weren't actually the easiest conversations. But I'm still glad that I talked to them about it. And I know for me, so good personal relationships. Even honestly, if when I talked to those people, they were at a loss for words, there was still, I love you, I love you too, I'm sorry that happened to you. And that feels good. And I didn't have a lot of expectations that, I mean, these were people that I loved, and we cared for each other, but I didn't have a lot of expectations that um, that it would hit them in a way they could give me, advice, and they would want to talk about it more, and that kind of
Mm,
thing. So I guess, um, yeah, it's twofold,
Right.
people that I love without a lot of expectations, and then people who've experienced the same thing that are maybe
Mm,
involved with other survivors,
yeah,
in
that makes sense.
groups. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I've also heard some survivors use sort of like they kind of gauge safety by like dropping little pieces and seeing
Ah,
what people respond to. And then if it's a good positive response, then they'll go a little deeper. And so I wonder if sometimes that can
oh,
be effective for people as well when they're not sure if this will be,
yeah.
you know.
Well, that's a good technique. So, what do you mean, Ashley? Like what would be uh, a hint? Like, would you tell a little bit of some other story of someone else and see how they reacted? Or
Sure,
just
I think it could
curious. Yeah.
look a couple different ways. So
Yeah.
maybe instead of like going into the depths of your trauma, instead, maybe just bringing up the topic of
Mm-hmm.
abuse and seeing how
Yeah.
somebody responds to that. And then if that's a
Yeah.
positive response, maybe bringing it to like, well, this happened to me, but it's only like a little slice of the story versus like bearing your
Yeah.
whole soul. And then
Yeah.
just slowly building trust in a way that feels safe. And if it doesn't feel good in any of those
Mm-hmm.
places, knowing that, you know what, maybe this is a person I don't share everything with. And
Yeah.
I haven't
Exactly.
delved too much. I've just given like a
Yes.
little taste.
That's really good. I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, that's really good.
Mm,
Good way to take care of yourself and not have too many expectations just to see
right,
to see how it lands.
right, right. And I liked how you talked about, it's a different expectation for survivor groups
Yeah.
and professionals versus friends and family. Hopefully, they can be supportive, but like you said, they may
Hmm.
not, they may have a loss of words. And most people aren't trained
Yeah.
to deal with these things. So that would make sense.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I found it easier to talk to, like, who, the people that want to talk about it at length would have probably be more other
Mm,
survivors, but
right.
it just depends, you know.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
we've got one more question here, and that is um, what is the name, please, of your friend's trauma organization? Is it Eco something or another? Could you mention that name again?
Oh, yes, it's Echo, ECHO training.
Echo
Echo
Training.
training. Yeah. It's based in Los Angeles, and you can find it online. And they actually have really great infographics online about trauma and the effects of trauma on the brain and what healing, recovers from. It's what I mean, what recovering, looks like, what post trauma looks like, and stuff like that. So yeah, echo training
Echo
and echo training, yeah. And there's probably a lot of things called echo, but you'll find it because
Okay,
just put in echo training and then trauma, and
got it.
it's all about trauma training.
Perfect. All
Yeah.
right. Thank you so, so much. I'm telling you, this has been such a pleasure talking with you. You have so much wisdom, and I think your story is one that really has it really has opened the door for many other people to come forward and speak. So thank you for your bravery, for your courage. I really do believe that you're not only a silence breaker, but you are somebody who is helping shape the world in a way that we are more open to having these conversations and where more support can be created for survivors. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Ashley. And can I just leave with a final word? I mean, I really,
Absolutely.
really appreciate everyone wanting to listen to me, and I hope that something that I said resonates with whoever's listening. I appreciate people tuning in, and Ashley, I appreciate you having me on the show, and I just, want other survivors to know that, I mean, if you take the steps to care for yourself and recognize that you have been through something traumatic, um, and that you're not alone, and there's help and resources there for you, that time is on your side, and life can be, a lot better than you had imagined before. And
Mm,
so it's not an easy journey, but it's a very, very positive one, um, in terms of results in the end, really. Um,
mm.
Thank you so much. As you know, Ashley, yeah. And
Oh,
I wish everyone luck on their own personal journeys.
thank you for that word. Yeah, so
Yeah.
important. It's difficult, but it's definitely worth it. And it gets
Yeah.
so much better the further you go and the more support you gain. Thank you so, so
It's
much,
true.
Caitlin.
It's true.
This
Thank
is wonderful.
you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ashley.
Well, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in for tonight's show. Make sure that you invite your friends to watch the replay and invite them into this Facebook group. Sending you all so much love and live with courage.